Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are getting into a really complex and frankly pretty esoteric topic, starseeds.
We are, and we're looking at findings from a specific investigative protocol, something designed to really test this idea of, non-terrestrial consciousnesses incarnating here on Earth.
And the sources for this are, they're pretty unique.
Yeah, they come from an investigative cycle they called Protocol 2871. And this was a really deep dive using a very controlled methodology.
Okay, so break that down for us. It involved an external hypnosis operator, but also a support telepath.
Exactly.
What makes that different? Why the support telepath?
Well, that's the key to the whole thing, really. It's about data purity. So you have the operator who guides the subject under hypnosis.
Right.
But the support telepath is the one actually doing the energetic observation. They're the one moving through the subconscious fields. And crucially, they were kept completely in the dark about the topic.
So they had no idea they were looking for starseeds.
None at all. This prevents any kind of, conscious bias or information contamination. It ensures what they perceived was coming directly from the subject's energy field.
That is a robust methodology. Okay, so let's jump right in. Using this process, what was the first big finding? Is this even a real thing?
The initial read was definitive. Yes, cases do exist.
But I'm sensing a but coming.
A huge but. The caveat is that it is a very, very small percentage of the population. Really tiny.
And what did these genuine cases actually look like? Because I think when people hear starseed, they imagine these advanced godlike beings.
Right, and the initial visualizations just broke that stereotype immediately. The telepaths saw past lives that were non-human, sure, but not necessarily these highly advanced humanoids.
Like what?
One of the first things that came through was a consciousness from a type of marine life. They were very specific, describing shallow water like a lake with algae, a very different kind of energy.
So not a spaceship commander.
Not at all. Another case involved life forms that were perceived as, less evolved than humans, closer to certain animal species.
That really broadens the definition then. It's not about being more advanced. It's just about being not from here.
Exactly. Non-terrestrial simply means not originating on Earth.
Which brings us to the big question. Why? What's the motivation for a consciousness to take on a human form?
The perception was that it's a kind of restart, a switch in the consciousness's will. It's really driven by this deep, overwhelming desire for a completely different experience, a new perspective.
A restart feels a little vague. Is it like taking a vacation, or is it more like a hard reset on your whole existence?
It's much closer to a hard reset.
Right.
And it's driven by either curiosity or just fatigue with their old reality.
Fatigue?
Imagine you exist in a reality of total freedom, where anything you will just happens instantly. After a while, that freedom might start to feel meaningless. You might actually start to yearn for the opposite. Exactly. So they will themselves into what is, for them, the most restrictive scenario imaginable, Earth density, just to see what it's like.
So they get here, but their core programming isn't fully human. Let's talk about their blueprint, their etheric DNA. What does that even mean? Are we talking about the physical double helix?
We're talking about the energy signature, the energetic memory that the consciousness carries with it, which then, influences the physical body.
And what does that look like?
That etheric DNA holds on to what the source called remaining particles, or basic forms of the previous species. And this isn't just some vague concept. It actually dictates how they operate here.
How does that actually show up in a person's life?
It can manifest in a few ways. You see different ways of thinking, these uncommon random impulses that just don't make sense in a human context.
And emotionally.
That's the big one. A general persistent feeling that something is missing, like they just can't quite grasp human life. They feel like everyone else got a manual and they didn't.
You'd think that this foreign DNA would be seen as a problem, like an interference. Was it seen as damaged or polluted?
That's a great question and a really key distinction. The DNA itself appears pure. It's not damaged. The problem is that the leftover characteristics are just so different from the human experience that it creates this massive challenge for the person.
So it's a mismatch.
A radical mismatch. That's what creates the problems, the vulnerabilities. They just don't fit the mold.
And the investigation connected this energetic mismatch to physical reality. I know this is a sensitive area, but the telepathist saw a link to conditions like autism. What was the proposed mechanism there?
Yes, and it's really important we frame this as a finding about energetic dynamics, not a medical diagnosis.
Of course.
The observation was that the non-terrestrial mental body is often incredibly highly charged. It's more evolved, it's faster, it operates on completely different principles.
So it's like trying to run advanced alien software on a human computer.
That's a perfect analogy. The perception was that this supercharged mental body can be too much for the physical body to handle, and that energetic overflow, that profound mismatch, is what they saw manifesting in this way.
That really reframes it. It shifts from being a biological problem to potentially being the consequence of an advanced system in a restrictive vehicle.
Precisely. It gives a kind of philosophical context to the very real difficulties these individuals face.
So let's talk about the term itself, Starseed.
Yeah.
If this genuine group is maybe, what, 2% of people? Why is the term so popular?
The term itself was identified mostly as a mental bias, a program that people create for themselves.
Why?
It's rooted in those little residual DNA particles, those memory fragments. The mind feels that something is different and it tries to create a story, a category to explain it. And that story is often a very romanticized one.
So that feeling of something is missing pushes them to build a narrative. But doesn't that make them a target?
It creates a massive vulnerability. The telepath looked at people who strongly identified with these ideas, and the finding was that most were fitting into stories. They were creating a scenario for themselves because they wanted to feel unique.
And that opens a door.
It kicks the door wide open for outside intervention and interference.
Which brings up the idea of external entities actually encouraging this belief. Who or what is doing that?
The investigation perceived what they called cosmic or interdimensional entities, mainly humanoids, who are actively inducing these beliefs. They're creating a separate segment, a huge self-feeding energetic loop.
And that's what we would call an aggregor, right? Can you just quickly define that?
An aggregor is basically an energetic entity, a force field, that's created and then fed by the collective energy and beliefs of a group of people. In this case, it feeds on the very specific energy of the Starseed belief system.
And what kind of energy is that? It sounds like it's tied to the ego.
It's pure ego fuel. The core program is this idea that regular humans are somehow less, unawakened, and that identifying with something from off-planet makes you more special, superior. It's fundamentally a belief of separation.
So why should the average person listening care about this? If it's just a belief system, what's the real-world risk?
The risk is giving away your personal power, willingly. If you believe your true home, your true self, is somewhere else, on Orion or the Pleiades, you stop fully engaging with your life here.
You're just waiting to be rescued.
You're waiting for rescue, you isolate yourself, and you pour all your energy into this external collective, the aggregor, instead of grounding it in your own life. It becomes a religion of escape. The investigation actually said its growth is like a religion's.
Let's really nail down the difference between the induced belief and the genuine article. You mentioned the DNA memory earlier.
Yes. The non-human parts are energetical memory or cell memory, and the mechanism is pretty simple. The more lives a consciousness has had outside of Earth, the bigger that external part remains in their DNA here.
And the opposite is true.
The opposite is true. The more lives you have on Earth, the smaller that external part gets. You become more and more human.
Which leads us to the case study of Alex, a 5-year-old boy.
Alex, yes. He was perceived as being on his very first life on Earth. A genuine first-timer.
And his DNA reading was, what was it?
It was a striking split. 60% human and 40% from his origin, which they just called play.
And his reason for coming here, it wasn't some grand mission to save humanity.
Not even close. His direct communication was incredibly simple. He just said he got tired of anything else.
Tired of freedom.
Pretty much. He had experienced total freedom, and he specifically wanted restriction. He chose Earth because he was curious about density, about physical sensation, the feeling of touch, of playing with his hands. The telepath said he saw the whole thing almost as a joke, a weird scenario to try.
That's an incredible clash of perspectives. So how did that show up in his energetic profile?
His energetic bodies were completely mismatched. His mental body was perceived as super busy, full, constantly running, way more evolved than an average human's.
Okay.
But his emotional body was described as brand new, like a factory reset. He just hadn't experienced human-style emotions before, so that entire system was immature.
An evolved mind with a baby's emotional maturity. That sounds like a recipe for chaos.
It creates intense internal pressure. And on top of that, his sexual body was in a state of major adaptation because that kind of physical energy has a much bigger impact here than on his old fluid world.
So even though he got what he wanted, density, that 40% non-human DNA is actually a struggle for him.
It is not beneficial for the Earth experience, no. He's experiencing a lot of confusion, a sense of isolation. The telepath described him as a triangle shape trying to fit in a square space.
Wow.
He struggles with social cues, but, he does love the physical part, playing with his toys.
And his home planet, play, was what, fifth dimension?
Fifth dimension, fluid energy, a system with very little control, no political structure. The beings there were tall, skinny, almost translucent, with these bright ice blue eyes, the total opposite of human density.
Okay, so that's the genuine case. Now let's hit them with the big number from the research.
Yeah.
As of June 2025, what was the perceived percentage of genuine starseeds on Earth?
The perception was 2%.
2. So 98% of people who identify with this are likely in that induced or self-created category.
That was the finding, yes.
Which brings us to the other example. The 27-year-old woman who believes she was from Orion.
Right. Her DNA told a very different story. It was 90% human. She had only about 5% residual reptilian and 5% humanoid memory from past lives. She lived here about 50 times.
So she was overwhelmingly human.
Overwhelmingly. But she was being influenced by two external presences, a reptilian and a humanoid, that were controlling parts of her mental body.
And what did that belief do to her life?
The effects were classic. She isolated herself from family, from friends. She put herself on a pedestal, believing she was superior to them because of her Orion origin. The report said she was, with her head in the clouds, always focused externally.
And giving up her power.
Willingly giving her power to the entities that were feeding her this ego story.
So this deep dive really shows us two very different paths. You have the incredibly rare, genuine consciousness like Alex, who chose density and is now struggling to adapt and learn within it.
And then you have the much, much larger group, people who are vulnerable because of some inner restlessness, and they get hijacked by external forces that give them an ego-pleasing story, a story that ultimately pulls them away from their own life and their own power.
A truly fascinating look at the energy behind these belief systems.
Yeah.
So we bring this all back to the central finding, that the non-terrestrial DNA shrinks with each life on Earth.
Right, that slow integration of external energetic memory into the human collective.
It really makes you think. How might that changing blueprint over millennia affect humanity's long-term evolution? That's something to chew on until our next deep dive.